I'm in my early 30s, and honestly, I can trace my very first fetish all the way back to first grade. I have distinct memories of certain boys in my class and desires that I felt for them and for other boys in general. And I have storybooks full of these fetishes, these fantasies fleshed out. Journals that go back to innocent 7, 8, 9-year-old times. Something that grew darker over time. Certainly through puberty, but well into my 20s and even into today. And over the course of 3+ decades, I can trace multiple fetishes, clothing and body parts and elaborate fantasies. I can trace them to specific moments in time. And on the one hand, I've never understood my fetishes better than I do now. I've processed a lot in journaling and conversations and certainly in therapy. But just because I understand them doesn't mean I'm done feeling the shame that I feel for some of them. To be quite honest, some of them consume me at times. I idolize them, and maybe for lack of a better word, I worship them. They consume my time and my energy, and ultimately they rip away my gaze, my fixation, my ultimate focus on God, on doing His will, loving Him and loving others. It's one thing to have a dark desire, or it's one thing to have a shameful one. And it's another thing altogether to have a consuming one. I've lost sleep looking at pornography or exploring other digital outlets for my fetishes, my shameful fantasies. And there are times where I think I'm getting over it, or I've achieved enough progress to do without. And then slowly but surely, desire returns, and it's like an itch that I can't stop. And to be quite honest, I feel addicted. I am an addict. I'm desperate for recovery. Therapist, minister, researcher, and author Jay Stringer wrote a book called Unwanted: How Sexual Brokenness Reveals Our Way to Healing. And on his website, he wrote an article called What Your Sexual Fantasies Might Say About You. And his words really land with me as someone who deeply struggles with his shame, with sexual brokenness, and with trying to figure out what to do with the cards I was dealt, how to move forward, how to not necessarily get over the fetish, but how to live with it. In his article, Stringer states, "For too long, the evangelical community has treated sexual fantasies and sexual struggles as something to condemn. Addressing sexual fantasies through the lens of abhorrent behavior intensifies shame and therefore deepens your involvement in the very behavior you wish to stop. There is another approach. It begins by listening to your lust. Internet search bars and browser histories expose your sin, but far more, they reveal the unaddressed and therefore unresolved stories of your life. Sexual fantasies are roadmaps. They pinpoint the location of your past harm and highlight the current roadblocks that keep you from freedom. The sooner we assume a posture of curiosity for our sexual fantasies, the more we will prepare our hearts for the redemptive work ahead." Stringer goes on to say, "Everyone has an arousal cocktail, a mixture of thoughts, images, stories, and fantasies that influence the content we find arousing. In isolation or in toxic religious cultures, we believe sexual fantasies reveal our iniquity. In reality, sexual fantasies reveal our wounds, and even the God-given desires we have for comfort, belonging, and risk." He concludes, "Sexual fantasies are messengers. You may not like the news they bring, but they will knock on the door of your life until you listen to what they need to tell you. One evening of deliberate curiosity about your sexual fantasies will take you further into transformation than 1,000 nights of prayerful despair." And so, my brothers, you who have long felt fantasies and secret fixations that bring you great shame, things that rob you of your time, your self-worth, your passions, your relationships, especially your relationship with the Almighty. Rest in this unsettling revelation. He knows. He knows the hairs on your head. He knows each breath and each step you take. And He knows your heart, for He made it. He knows what beckons you in all the ways, and He longs for you to be free of all the shame. May we not be afraid to confess our idols and lay them down before the One who sculpted us, knew us even before the womb. He is not surprised or put off by our secrets. He wrote connection into our hearts, into our very stories, into what we're really after. And so may we step boldly with a thoughtful curiosity into the deepest levels of our humanity. We are all wired and hungry, some of us starving for connection. And this is a valid, lovely thing. May we rightly channel our hunger how God calls us, and let us hide no longer in the garden, afraid for how we may be seen, truly seen. It is time we step out, first within ourselves, further and further into new life.